Good afternoon. I'm WDHN Chief Meteorologist Scott Roberts in the Weather Center. We are tracking Hurricane Dorian, which is back over the Atlantic, north of the Caribbean, and really there hasn't been anything in the way of major changes with this storm as far as its path and its intensity, but it does have sustained winds of 85 miles per hour, and as far as from yesterday in comparison, the one thing that has really changed is the Hurricane Center is expecting the storm to strengthen a bit more and a bit more quickly as well, possibly by Friday afternoon. So tomorrow by 1 o'clock, we could be dealing with a major hurricane moving towards the Bahamas and getting even a little bit stronger as we head into Saturday, likely before making landfall somewhere on the east coast of Florida as a major Category 4 storm with winds in excess of 130 miles per hour. So that's the 5-day forecast cone. Going beyond that, there are a lot of uncertainties to the forecast and a lot of uncertainties for the forecast in our neck of the woods in southeast Alabama, the Florida Panhandle, and southwest Georgia. I want to take a look at the model plots. These are the forecast models, that some of them that we use for projecting where storms will go. These are specific for our hurricanes, and there is pretty good consensus that the storm will trek along the northern Bahamas and then eventually making landfall somewhere between, say, West Palm Beach and the Space Coast, upwards of Cape Canaveral, and then eventually going more across Florida and then turning to the north. But the question is going to be, how quickly does this storm make that turn to the north? If it takes a little bit longer for that turn, we could see a greater impact here in the Wiregrass. But as you can see, the general consensus is right now that this will be coming in the general vicinity of the southeastern part of the country and certainly into the potential WDHN viewing area. Now, on satellite imagery, storm's looking pretty healthy. There's been a bit of convection around the center of the storm. You can see the brighter oranges. The center of circulation is right in here. It is moving to the northwest. Lost that forward speed, actually. It is moving northwest at 13 miles per hour, so there hasn't been any major change in that speed either, and there's a lot of warm water for the storm to deal with. On the visible satellite imagery, you can see it's starting to take more of that classic kind of hurricane shape. There's a good amount of inflow, a little bit of dry air entering right here, so that will limit how big the storm can get. This is still a fairly compact storm. The hurricane force winds only extend out from the center about 20 nautical miles, but it is going to begin an environment that is a lot more favorable for development over the next few days. There's a lot of moisture for the storm to feed off of and a lot of warm water as well. And even as it treks a little bit closer to the Florida Peninsula, going into the Labor Day weekend holiday and going into Labor Day itself, lots of moisture for it to work with. Now, as far as that, across the southeast right now, dry air. That's why we've been enjoying some pretty good conditions as far as the temperatures and the low humidity for us, but that will be going away as the storm gets back into the southeast, or gets into the southeast. Now, as far as those water temperatures, they are very warm. We need temperatures upwards of 80 to 85 degrees for tropical development to be supported. Ahead of that, we have that 85 degrees over the Bahamas. It's even warmer where we see these darker colors. The darker shading indicates the warmer water temperatures, and that extends even closer to the Florida Peninsula. So I think it is a pretty good sure bet that we will be dealing with a major Category 4 storm making landfall on the Florida East Coast. And if it is able to make its way into the Atlantic, there's a lot, or excuse me, into the Gulf of Mexico, there's a lot of factors at work. There are areas of very warm water to our south, so potentially there could be pretty decent redevelopment and pretty decent strengthening with the storm if it were to make its way into the Gulf of Mexico. And that's beyond the 5-day forecast cone, so that's something that we'll have to really look at over the next few days. Now, I want to take a look at some of the computer models that we do use to forecast. This is the European model. It has changed a bit over the last model run compared to earlier. It was trending in the general solution that it would be bringing the storm more in our direction, but over the last several hours it has slowed down the progress of Dorian. Has the same idea, right, that we've been talking about, that basically the Bermuda high is going to act as a blocking high and help to steer this storm into the Florida Peninsula, and beyond that it's going to depend on how weak the high is able to become, and with that it would open up a path for the storm to move more north, where we can see this particular model does keep the storm through Wednesday, actually well to our southeast, still along the Florida coast, and under this scenario would become more of a concern for the entire east coast of the U.S., and with that it would minimize our impacts here in the Wiregrass. Now, the American GFS model has been a little bit faster with making its landfall. That's more in the direction that the National Hurricane Center is kind of basing their forecast path on, a little bit faster and possibly even a little bit further to the north. And actually this is updating since this graphic has been built. You can see the icon a little bit off center from that circulation, but this does take a little bit further to the north, which would mean it would cross more of the peninsula and possibly even curve to the north a little bit more, but we would still feel some breezy conditions with this over the middle part of next week. So it's certainly not something that we need to put on the back burner. We certainly need to keep an eye on this. Now, here's a comparison between the two models. We can see how the two diverge as time goes on, and it's just going to be a matter of figuring out which solution is more correct. Now, as far as that red line, that's the hurricane forecast path. You can see more towards the white streamlines, which is the American GFS model, that European model, a little bit slower, a lot slower actually with that landfall. The GFS brings it into Florida Peninsula sometime during the day on Labor Day. The European model is quite a bit slower with that, which could mean a stronger storm when it does make any kind of impact. Now, as far as in the Wiregrass, I want to emphasize there are a lot of things that we do know, and there's a lot of things, certainly a lot more that we don't know, but some of the things that we do know right now, we are expecting a major hurricane at landfall on the east coast of Florida, and the path where it makes landfall and the path across the peninsula will determine what kind of impacts we have here in the Wiregrass within the WDHN viewing area. But either way, I think we will see an increase in storm chances when it is in our neighborhood, and with that we could have some flooding conditions. Certainly it is going to be breezy out there. We will have stronger winds than what we have been dealing with, and do want to emphasize lots of forecast uncertainty. So the timing would be late Tuesday and going into Wednesday, depending on how things progress over the next few days. And really, honestly, it's going to be over the weekend, probably Saturday into Sunday, when we do have a really good idea on what the storm will be doing. But if you're just joining us, we have quite a few people on the Facebook live stream with us right now. The latest on Dorian is that the strength has maintained at 85 miles per hour. It's moving northwest at 13 miles per hour, and there haven't been any really major changes to the forecast path since earlier in the day. So that's good news. The Hurricane Center, from the Hurricane Center, that means that they're a little bit more confident on their path that they are projecting. I agree with their path. There's a lot of reasons for that. But as far as the strength, it looks like this storm will be a little bit stronger as we do go into the next couple of days, likely becoming a major hurricane a little sooner than originally projected, and possibly even a little bit stronger, now projected to become a Category 4 storm before landfall. And I think part of that would be the reason, part of the reasons for that would be the storm slowing down a little bit, and certainly a lot of warm water for the storm to deal with. And it didn't weaken as much over the Caribbean as original projections called for, simply because there wasn't as much interaction with Hispaniola and certainly Puerto Rico. It stayed a little bit further to the east and northeast, hitting more of the U.S. and British Virgin Islands before it made its way back into the Atlantic Ocean. So very minimal interference from land. Now, if had it crossed over Hispaniola in the Dominican Republic, you're talking about 10 to 12,000 foot mountains that would certainly tear the storm apart a little bit, which would have made it a little bit weaker as it reemerged into the Atlantic. Since that's not the case, and there's not going to be much interference from any land masses until it makes its way to the U.S., it will become stronger. The Bahamas don't offer much resistance for tropical systems. Certainly not something that's becoming a little bit stronger. Now, as far as those water temperatures, talking about that just a little bit ago, they are very soupy, very warm, almost like bath water. So a lot of energy for hurricanes to work with right now. We're getting into the peak part of hurricane season, getting close to that. Actually, the early to middle part of September is where we're at the peak, and part of that is the reason why is because that's when the water temperatures in the Atlantic Basin are the warmest. Same thing for the Gulf of Mexico and for the Caribbean. We're talking about almost 90-degree water temperatures across parts of the Bahamas into the Turks and Caicos in the general area of where the storm will be passing through. As far as before it makes its way into our area. Now, as far as that forecast path, there is going to be a lot of uncertainty with this storm. So don't discount the storm. There's a lot of things that could happen for it to be a little bit more favorable for us here in the Wiregrass. Things are trending in that direction, at least starting to trend in that direction, but just as easily as things have been changing in the direction of maybe a less of an impact here, it could still be a situation where the Gulf of Mexico still needs to be worried about this storm reemerging. You see the west coast of Florida and up into the Big Bend and areas just to our east are included in that 5-day forecast cone. So that's the more or less the update for now from the National Hurricane Center. I'm going to go ahead and see if there's any questions to our Facebook page with this. I know there's had a few phone calls into the Weather Center about, say, if schools are going to be canceled and things of that nature. It's certainly too early to tell what will be going on, and a lot of that will be simply because there's a lot of unknowns with the exact forecast path, and well, it really won't be until Saturday into Sunday when we'll have that better idea of where things will go as far as that exact path from the storm. So looks like things are pretty quiet right now. This computer is sometimes a little bit slow, but the latest is we do have a strengthening hurricane and will likely become a major Category 3 storm over the next few days. And the greatest impacts, no matter what, will be felt along the Florida Peninsula as we go into possibly the Labor Day holiday and into Tuesday as a weakening storm through central Florida. And beyond that, that's where we do have questions, and we still do have the possibility of the potential for some impacts here in the Wiregrass. I think at the very least at this time, we will be dealing with some breezy conditions and an increase in rain and storm chances. So certainly keep your eye on the forecast. We will have more throughout the afternoon and into the evening hours. The next update from the National Hurricane Center comes out at 7 o'clock Central Time. So that's when we'll have a better idea of, or another idea of what the storm is doing. And as far as the next major update to the forecast path from the Hurricane Center will be right before WDHN News at 10 o'clock. The big advisories are 10 o'clock and 5 o'clock from the National Hurricane Center around the clock AM and PM. So for now, I'm Scott Roberts in the WDHN Weather Center. We'll send it back to your regular Facebook programming, and we'll have more on WDHN News at 5, 6, and 10 tonight. We'll see you then.